In the early 1980s, an expedition team from a small university in Canada set out to explore a remote region of Labrador. Their goal was simple: document the folklore and oral traditions of isolated villages scattered across the rugged landscape. The journey began innocently enough. The team comprised of 3 anthropologists, 2 historians, and a local guide named Joseph traveled by boat along the icy waters of the Churchill River. As they ventured deeper into the wilderness, the trees grew denser, the air colder, and the silence heavier. They were heading toward a cluster of villages known collectively as Kangikswalujwak, though locals referred to it simply as the Forgotten Place. Joseph, who had grown up nearby but never visited these specific settlements himself, warned the team repeatedly about venturing too far inland. He spoke cryptically of stories passed down through generations, tales of strange disappearances, eerie lights in the forest, and whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. But the researchers dismissed his warnings as superstition. After 3 days of travel, they arrived at the first village. It was unlike anything they'd ever seen. The houses were dilapidated, their wooden walls warped and splintered by decades of neglect. Windows were boarded up, doors hung crookedly on rusted hinges, and the streets were eerily empty. No children played outside, no smoke rose from chimneys, and no dogs barked in greeting. It was as if time itself had abandoned this place. "Where is everyone?" asked Dr. Emily Carter, the lead anthropologist, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain composed. Joseph didn't answer. His face was pale, his eyes wide with something between fear and recognition. He muttered under his breath in Inuktitut, words the others couldn't understand, but instinctively felt were prayers. As they explored further, they discovered signs of recent habitation. Plates of half-eaten food sat on tables, clothes hung neatly in closets, and beds were still made. It was as though the villagers had vanished mid-life, leaving everything behind. The strangest detail, however, was the absence of decay. Food hadn't rotted, wood hadn't crumbled, and even the flowers in window boxes looked freshly watered. It was as if the entire village had been frozen in time. That night, the team decided to camp inside one of the larger homes. They lit lanterns and huddled together, trying to make sense of what they'd seen. Dr. Carter suggested natural explanations, a sudden evacuation due to disease or environmental disaster, but none of them rang true. Something about the scene felt unnatural. Around midnight, the noises began. At first, it was faint, a soft creaking sound, like floorboards settling. Then came the whispers. They were indistinct at first, just murmurs carried on the wind. But soon they grew louder and more insistent. Words formed, though none of the team members could identify the language. It wasn't English, French, or any dialect of Inuktitut they recognized. The voices seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere, wrapping around them like tendrils of fog. Panic set in when the lights flickered. One by one, the lanterns went out, plunging the room into darkness. Joseph screamed, clutching at some unseen assailant, while Dr. Carter fumbled desperately for matches. When she finally relit a lantern, Joseph was gone. His chair was overturned, and the front door stood ajar, swinging gently in the breeze. They searched the house and the surrounding area, calling his name until their throats were raw, but he was nowhere to be found. All they discovered was a single footprint in the snow, outside a bare human foot, much too large to belong to Joseph. Over the next few days, the remaining members of the team tried to leave, but every attempt ended in failure. Each path they took led back to the village, no matter how carefully they followed the map. The forest seemed alive, shifting and rearranging itself to trap them. Trees loomed closer than before, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky. Shadows moved where there should have been none, and the whispers followed them wherever they went. Dr. Carter kept a journal during this time, documenting everything in meticulous detail. Her entries became increasingly erratic. Day 3. We are not alone here. There is something watching us, always just out of sight. I can feel its eyes on me even now. The others won't talk about it, but I know they feel it too. Day 5. Another one is missing. This time, it was Sarah. She went to fetch water from the well and never returned. I heard her scream, but when we got there, the bucket was lying overturned, and the rope was coiled neatly beside it. No sign of struggle, no blood, just gone. Day 7. I don't think we're meant to leave. Whatever took the villagers has claimed us as well. I see them sometimes, standing at the edge of the trees. Their faces are wrong, too smooth, too blank. They watch and wait, and I know it's only a matter of time before they come for me. On the 9th day, the last surviving member of the team, a historian named Mark, managed to escape. How he did so remains unclear, as he refused to speak of it afterward. When search parties finally located him weeks later, he was wandering aimlessly through the woods, emaciated and babbling incoherently. He died shortly after being rescued, his body racked with malnutrition and exposure. Before he passed, however, he gave investigators a single clue, a photograph taken during the expedition. In it, the team stood smiling in front of one of the village houses. But when examined closely, figures could be seen lurking in the background, tall, thin shapes with elongated limbs and featureless faces. They blended almost seamlessly with the trees, yet their presence was undeniable. Attempts to investigate the area have consistently failed. Equipment malfunctions, compasses spin wildly, and GPS devices lose signal. Locals refuse to speak of it, and those who dare venture close often return, changed, withdrawn, paranoid, haunted by nightmares they cannot explain. A young journalist, Elena Vasile, arrives in Blackwater Hollow to investigate rumors of disappearances. Her brother, a cartographer, vanished near the village months prior. The villagers greet her with polite hostility. Children stare silently. Adults avert their eyes. The air smells of damp earth and decay. Eleanor lodges at the only inn, run by a widow named Mrs. Grail, who warns her, stay indoors after sundown. The Hollow. Remembers. Exploring the village, Eleanor notes oddities. A church with no graves, a disused well sealed with iron chains, and a barn where livestock are kept but never seen. At the local tavern, she overhears fragments of a folk song. Blood for the crop, bones for the yield, the hollow feeds, and the hollow heals. In the church's crypt, she finds a ledger from 1666. The entries describe a famine that drove the villagers to sacrifice 7 children to an ancient spirit in exchange for fertile soil. The final entry reads, "The Hollow accepted our offering. The fields bloom, but the children walk no more." That night, Eleanor hears whispers through her walls, voices in a dialect she doesn't recognize. Shadows flicker at the edges of her lantern light. Mrs. Grail delivers a meal, her eyes hollow. "You shouldn't have come," she mutters. "They're hungry." Eleanor follows the whispers to the sealed well. Prying off the chains, she descends into a cavern lined with child-sized skeletons, their bones fused with gnarled roots. At the center is an altar stained black, etched with symbols. A journal lies nearby, her brother's. His final entry. "They're using me to feed it." "I'm sorry, Nell." Villagers surround the well, chanting. Their faces are gaunt, eyes glowing faintly green. They drag Eleanor to the altar, explaining the bargain. Each generation must sacrifice one outsider to renew the pact. The Hollow, a malevolent entity bound to the soil, demands a blood offering to keep the crops thriving. As they prepare to slit her throat, Eleanor smashes a lantern, igniting the roots. The cavern erupts in flames. The villagers scream, not in pain, but in terror. "You've angered it. The hollow will starve." Eleanor flees, but the village is gone by dawn, replaced by a sinkhole. Only the inn remains, half submerged in mud. Mrs. Grail's body is found weeks later, her mouth stuffed with blackened wheat. Local papers report Blackwater Hollow's disappearance, blaming a landslide. But farmers nearby claim the earth still whispers, and travelers avoid the dales after dark. Some say the hollow's spirit roams, seeking new sacrifices to restore its power. It was a crisp autumn evening when 4 friends, Emma, Ryan, Alex, and Sarah, decided to take a weekend road trip through the countryside. They had just graduated from college and were eager to explore places far removed from their bustling city lives. After hours of driving down winding country roads, the group arrived at the edge of a dense forest late Friday night. According to the map, Whispering Hollow lay somewhere within these trees. There were no signs or markers indicating anyone else had been there recently, or possibly ever. Still, they pressed on, flashlight beams cutting through the thick darkness as they trudged deeper into the woods. The air grew colder as they walked, despite the warm weather earlier in the day. An eerie silence enveloped them. Even the wind seemed reluctant to disturb the stillness. After nearly 2 hours of hiking, they stumbled upon the first sign of human habitation. A crumbling stone archway covered in moss, vines twisting around it like skeletal fingers, clutching at something unseen. Emma whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "This must be it." Beyond the archway lay the remains of what might once have been a thriving village. Broken cottages leaned precariously against each other, their windows shattered and doors hanging off rusted hinges. A central well stood in the middle of the clearing, its wooden bucket long since rotted away. Everything smelled faintly of earth and decay. They set up camp near the well, lighting a small fire to ward off the chill. As they ate dinner, none of them spoke much. The oppressive quiet of the village weighed heavily on them all. But soon, something changed. At first, it was subtle, a soft murmur carried by the breeze, almost indistinguishable from the rustling leaves. Then it became clearer. Voices whispering words they couldn't quite make out. The sound surrounded them, coming from every direction at once. Yet no matter how hard they listened, they couldn't pinpoint its source. Sarah asked, clutching her jacket tightly around herself. "What is that?" Ryan replied, scanning the shadows nervously. "I don't know. Probably just the wind." But it wasn't the wind. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they sounded like dozens of people talking simultaneously. And then, they started calling their names. Each name slithered into their ears like a snake, sending shivers down their spines. Panic began to rise among them. Alex said firmly, grabbing his backpack, "We need to leave now." But before they could move, the fire sputtered and died, plunging them into darkness. Their flashlights flickered erratically, casting chaotic beams of light across the ruins. In those flashes, they saw figures moving between the buildings, shadowy shapes that darted too quickly for them to focus on. Terrified, the group ran blindly into the woods, abandoning their supplies in their haste to escape. The whispers followed them, growing angrier, more demanding. Branches clawed at their faces and clothes as they pushed through the underbrush, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Hours passed, though time felt distorted in the suffocating blackness. Eventually, they collapsed in a small clearing, exhausted and disoriented. That's when they realized something even worse than the whispers. They weren't alone. From the trees emerged 3 men, dressed in tattered clothing, their faces gaunt and hollow-eyed. They moved silently, their expressions unreadable. Behind them loomed more figures, dozens of them, emerging from the darkness like wraiths. "Who are you?" Emma shouted, her voice shaking. One of the men stepped forward, his lips parted, revealing jagged teeth. When he spoke, his voice was low and guttural, echoing unnaturally. "You shouldn't have come here." Before they could react, the villagers lunged. The friends scattered, screaming as they tried to flee. Each step felt heavier, as if the ground itself resisted their movements. The villagers pursued relentlessly, their cries mingling with the relentless whispers. Somehow, miraculously, Emma and Ryan managed to find each other amidst the chaos. Together, they stumbled upon an abandoned car hidden in the woods, a relic left behind by some unfortunate soul who hadn't made it out alive. With shaking hands, Ryan hotwired the vehicle while Emma kept watch, her heart pounding as the mob closed in. The engine roared to life just as the villagers reached them. Tires screeched against dirt as they sped away, leaving Alex and Sarah behind. Tears streamed down Emma's face as she clutched the steering wheel, guilt crushing her chest. She wanted to turn back, but Ryan stopped her. "If we go back, we're dead too." They drove for hours, not stopping until they reached civilization again. When they recounted their story to authorities, no one believed them. Search parties sent to investigate Whispering Hollow returned empty-handed, claiming the area was deserted. No trace of Alex or Sarah was ever found. It was 1989 when a young journalist named Elena Vasile decided to investigate the rumors surrounding Hollow's End. She had grown up hearing tales from her grandmother, stories of villagers disappearing without a trace, strange rituals performed under moonlit skies, and a curse that drove outsiders mad. At first, she dismissed them as mere superstitions, but something gnawed at her curiosity. Armed with a notebook, camera, and flashlight, Elena set out to uncover the truth behind the legends. Her journey began in Brasov, a bustling city surrounded by medieval charm. From there, she traveled eastward, following winding roads until they dissolved into narrow dirt paths overgrown with weeds. As she ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew colder, and an unnatural silence enveloped her surroundings. Birds ceased their songs. Even the wind seemed reluctant to stir the leaves above. By dusk, Elena reached what appeared to be the edge of civilization, a crumbling stone archway, half consumed by ivy. Beyond it lay Hollow's End, shrouded in twilight's embrace. The village looked like something out of a nightmare. Dilapidated cottages leaned precariously against each other, their windows dark and lifeless. Cobblestone streets were cracked and overrun with moss, while rusted farming tools lay scattered across fields reclaimed by nature. Elena hesitated before stepping inside, her instincts screaming at her to turn back, but determination outweighed fear. She set up camp near the village square, lighting a small fire to ward off both chill and unease. As night fell, the darkness became oppressive, swallowing everything beyond the flickering flames. The stillness was deafening, until the whispers started. At first, they were faint, almost imperceptible. Elena thought perhaps her mind was playing tricks on her, conjuring sounds from the crackling fire or distant wildlife. But soon, the voices grew louder, overlapping in a cacophony of murmurs that sent chills down her spine. They spoke in languages she didn't recognize, their tones shifting between pleading and menacing. Her breath hitched as she realized the whispers seemed to emanate from all around her, closing in like a suffocating blanket. Terrified yet resolute, Elena grabbed her flashlight and ventured toward one of the nearest houses. Its door hung ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. Inside, the air smelled musty, tinged with decay. Dust coated every surface, and faded photographs lined the walls, faces staring blankly into eternity. One image caught her eye, a family portrait, eerily similar to the descriptions her grandmother had once shared. The resemblance was uncanny, right down to the child clutching a doll with hollow eyes. As she examined the photo more closely, a sudden gust extinguished her flashlight. Darkness swallowed her whole, and the whispers returned, this time louder, angrier. She stumbled backward, tripping over debris and landing hard on the wooden floor. That's when she saw it. Glowing orbs, hovering in the corners of the room, pulsating with malevolent energy. Panic surged through her veins as she scrambled to her feet and fled the house, leaving the whispers and whatever else lurked inside behind. When dawn broke, Elena emerged shaken, but determined to continue her investigation. She explored several more buildings, finding evidence of hurried departures, half-eaten meals left on tables, children's toys abandoned mid-play, and journals filled with frantic scribbles about the coming storm. Each entry hinted at some impending doom, though none provided clarity. One particularly disturbing discovery came from the church at the center of the village. Its heavy oak doors groaned open to reveal rows of pews covered in cobwebs. At the altar stood a statue of an angel, its face chipped away as if someone had deliberately defaced it. Scrawled across the walls in charred markings were phrases like, "They are watching, and do not look back." But the most chilling artifact lay hidden beneath the pulpit, a ledger detailing births, deaths, and disappearances. Entire pages were crossed out violently, as if erasing the existence of those listed. Among them, Elena found names matching the people in the photographs she'd seen earlier. Her stomach churned as realization dawned. These weren't just stories. This was real. That evening, as she prepared to leave, Elena noticed something peculiar. A figure stood at the edge of the village, partially obscured by trees. It wore tattered clothing and moved with jerky, unnatural motions. When she called out, it vanished into thin air. Heart pounding, she packed her belongings hastily and began retracing her steps toward the archway. But no matter how far she walked, the village seemed to stretch endlessly before her. Hours passed, yet she couldn't escape. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her, and she collapsed onto the cold ground. When she awoke, she was back in the village square, surrounded by the same crumbling structures. Worse still, her camera and notebook were gone, along with any proof of her findings. Elena's disappearance made headlines weeks later, when her car was discovered parked near the forest's edge. Search parties combed the area, but found no trace of her. Locals refused to speak of Hollow's End, claiming it was cursed land, best left undisturbed. Some whispered that anyone foolish enough to enter would become part of the village itself, doomed to wander its desolate streets forever. Decades later, another group of researchers attempted to locate Hollow's End using satellite imagery. What they uncovered defied explanation. Aerial photos showed nothing but dense forest where the village should have been. However, infrared scans revealed heat signatures suggesting structures buried beneath layers of vegetation. Stranger still, audio recordings captured during the expedition contained faint whispers, voices eerily reminiscent of those Elena described in her final report.